Spider-Man 2 came out in 2004 and is directed by Sam Raimi and stars Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst, Alfred Molina, and James Franco, and I'm very excited to give you guys my review for this movie. If you've seen it, be sure to let me know what you thought about it. As well, be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Now let's get into this review. In this movie, Peter Parker is beset with troubles in his failing personal life as he battles a brilliant scientist named Dr. Otto Octavius. So Spider-Man 2 is definitely my favorite Spider-Man movie, and I think probably my favorite superhero comic book movie. It's definitely my top 3, but I think it's right now my number 1. And for me, I think the reason why I love this movie so much is how character focused it is on Peter Parker rather than Spider-Man. Because watching this movie, you're like, there is Spider-Man in this, but there's a lot more Peter Parker than there is Spider-Man, if that makes sense. The character makes him very human, which they had already done in the first movie, but they do it even more in this one, where he becomes a much more relatable character than some of the other superheroes we get in the newer movies. But he's much more relatable with, struggling financially, struggling with his relationships, like even besides being Spider-Man, that's stuff that a lot of people deal with. And then they got the added layer of him being Spider-Man, which is where all the superhero-y goodness comes into this. But I love what they do with his character in this movie. Really sort of beats down Peter Parker, like everything's just going wrong for him, and just throughout the movie it keeps getting worse. So they really make you feel connected with the character. You feel bad for him. This part you're like, you can relate with this guy. And I think that's great because it elevates the scenes where he is Spider-Man, because you care about his character so much, and it makes one of the scenes very, very exciting, which is the train scene at the end, or towards the end, where he decides to come back as Spider-Man. He's got his powers back, and they have that great shot where he sort of swings through the newspaper, swings towards Doc Ock, and they do that transition through Doc Ock's sunglasses. It's a great scene. And then the fight on top of the train is still, I think, in my opinion, one of the best fight scenes in a superhero comic book movie. I love that entire scene. I know some people make fun of Tobey Maguire's facial expressions while stopping the train, but never bothered me. I imagine that'd be somewhat what your face would look like if you're trying to stop a train. I mean, your arms probably be pulled out of their sockets, but it wouldn't be a normal face, I'll just say that. But I thought that scene was fantastic, and like I said, the build up to it was great, because there's a big chunk of this movie where Peter Parker is just Peter Parker, not Spider-Man, where his powers were sort of failing him at times, because he's sort of struggling between being Spider-Man but not wanting to be Spider-Man and not having that responsibility, so his powers start sort of shutting off. So that was great. Then he has, I feel like, the whole second act or so of him just being Peter Parker, and some things are better, but they got some great scenes where he's like seeing what's happening when he doesn't keep that responsibility of being Spider-Man, where he sees a guy getting mugged in an alleyway. Then there's a great scene where a house is on fire and he goes in and saves a little girl, but then you learn afterwards there's another person who didn't make it because he wasn't Spider-Man. So there was great stuff like this throughout the movie where he's constantly trying to figure out what he needs to do. And I thought that was really good. And even on a smaller scale for people like in their personal lives, I feel like that's something a lot of people struggle with. There's things that they want to do, but they can't do it because they have responsibilities with work or maybe taking care of somebody, something like that. So it's not on the level of being a superhero, but I think that's something a lot of people as they get older can understand. So I really enjoyed that. And I enjoy some of the other dynamics in this movie, especially with the villain, Doc Ock. I think he's one of the best superhero villains, because at the start, he seems like a very genuine guy, whereas like Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, I thought he was a great villain, but he wasn't the best person, just the way you could see he clearly didn't have a great relationship with his own son. Whereas Doc Ock seems great. He's got a wife. They seem to be good with each other. He's doing his work. He's doing it for the betterment of mankind, not for his own gain. So that was great. And then he becomes a villain, and I thought all that was really well done, because you could understand where he was at, why he was doing what he was doing. I thought that was great. There's some fantastic action scenes with him and Spider-Man. The train scene I've already mentioned, but there's some great ones where they're on the side of buildings. That was fantastic. So I really liked their dynamic and how they set up the villain at the start being sort of somebody that Peter was idolizing, and they were getting along very well. So I really, really like that. And there's some great stuff with Aunt May in this, where it sort of seems like she may know Peter's Spider-Man, which is sort of a cool idea. But there's some great moments with them. I think those two characters have great moments in all three of these movies, where Aunt May sort of gives wisdom to Peter. I think it's great. And the stuff with Mary Jane in this, I know a lot of people don't like what they do with Mary Jane, I guess the way she treats Peter, but whenever I've watched these, I'm sort of like, I can understand it, because at the very end of the last movie, she sort of said that she loves him and wants to be with him. He said no and basically friend-zoned her, and even at the start of this movie, she sort of gives him a second chance, but he doesn't do anything. So I can understand why she's like upset at him, even when he says he's gonna do something for her and he doesn't. Like, we get he's Spider-Man, but from her perspective, I can understand it. But it works out in the end. Yeah, she leaves somebody at the altar, but you know, Peter's happy now, so that's all right. But yeah, so I do enjoy what they did there for the most part, and it really sort of built the character of Peter Parker, was sort of just constantly weighing him down with everything in this movie. So I thought that was great. The stuff with James Franco's character, I thought that was pretty good as well. His character in these movies have never been my favorite, and he's not in this movie a ton. He pops up here and there. He's used in a good way for this movie, I think. He's, like I said, he's not in a lot, but he's always there sort of when he needs to be, if that makes sense. So that's fine. And then some of the other returning characters, like J. Jonah Jameson, is great. There's a lot of really funny moments with him in this movie. That was fantastic. And overall, I just really loved this movie because I have a great time with it. The action is fantastic. All the Spider-Man scenes are great. I love when they're fighting at the side of a building or on the train, as I mentioned. That was great. And like rewatching it, like, there's not maybe a ton of actual Spider-Man stuff in this as what you might think. Like, there is a fair amount, but it's a lot more Peter Parker, and that's like what I think makes this movie great, is how character focused it is, and focused on the human rather than the hero, the superhero, if that makes sense. And it just elevated this movie, had more sort of weight to it, more depth, and it made you care about the superhero more, having more connection to the real person. So I thought that was fantastic. It definitely feels like a superhero movie you don't get a whole lot of anymore. And I said the same thing about the first one, but this one really, like the way it took its characters seriously, made it more relatable than some of the other ones do. Even when they humanize them, they're still like millionaires or billionaires or something, so can't relate to them too much. But with this one, I thought they did a great job with pretty much everything. There is some dated CGI in this, but for the most part, I thought it was still very good, better than the first movie. But a lot of it still looked quite good for me. It still holds up. There's just a couple moments like, yeah. And over my issues with this are pretty nitpicky. I think my biggest nitpick is the scene where Doc Ock goes to get Peter Parker to find Spider-Man, and he sort of throws a car at him, which is a very cool scene, but still, it's like, you're trying to get his help. You may have just killed him and then throws him against the walls. Like, again, you may have just like killed him or paralyzed him. So that's like, okay, if you think about it, doesn't really make sense, and Doc Ock's supposed to be a very smart person. But those are just a couple things within like a minute of this movie, so it's pretty nitpicky for me. I don't have really any major issues with this. I think it was fantastic overall for me. As I said, my favorite Spider-Man movie, and I'd say right now probably my favorite superhero movie of all time. It's definitely my top 3 for sure, but for me, I'm going to give Spider-Man 2 a 96%. So guys, those are my thoughts on Spider-Man 2. If you've seen it, be sure to let me know what you thought about this movie. As well, be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. And be sure to stay tuned for some more reviews coming soon. I'm hoping to have a review out for Godzilla vs. Kong coming out. As well, this weekend, I'm hoping to see the new Ant-Man movie. So I'm hoping to have my review out for that on Sunday, possibly Monday, but hopefully Sunday. So stay tuned for that. And until my next video, take care, everybody.